I've got my compliance approved slide deck here. So I was tempted to leave in the corporate approved slide deck. They've got a lorem ipsum page and says, language will be provided by compliance. And I managed to convince them I don't need anything because nothing in here is specific to the financial industry. Nothing in here is anything that you couldn't apply more broadly, but all of this comes from my background in a financial services company that operates globally. If you haven't heard of INTL FCStone, I guess I'll get into it a little bit later about what we do, but we operate globally. And so right now we have audit requirements out of Brazil that massively outstrip what we are required to do in London and in the United States. They are, it's like 5-year audit record of every server accessed by every person in the company. And we're like, why? But, so first thing I want to do, I wrote this, I kind of decided to start from a place of expecting that there were some people who hadn't started DevOps at all. Is there anybody like that here that just hasn't started DevOps in any way? Okay, then we can skip some things. I do want to talk about this though. This one's a personal sticking point for me. When I read a blog and it says something like, never take a job titled DevOps engineer because the company doesn't know what they're doing. Well, that's my job title, so I'm a little, and I didn't know what I was doing when I was getting into it. But you will get a lot of strong opinions out there about the way to do DevOps. There's a lot of people who talk about, never do this, never do that. DevOps isn't a team. DevOps isn't just tools. But the point I want to make is that while those things, all those comments come from places of experience, they're not the same for everybody. No one can tell your group how to do DevOps. The way we started at FCStone is we had a development team that self-rolled TeamCity and Octopus Deploy CI/CD pipeline. And they started rolling that and they started providing it to other teams. And while we are not huge, we are the product of 38 mergers and acquisitions since 2009. And the company itself started in 2004. And we have entire development teams that are employed by a business line that have no reporting into central IT. And we don't get to tell them what to do. The only way I get to get them to adopt something else is basically making their life easier. But providing the support on the CI pipeline was taking up all these developers' time, and they brought me in to take over that and provide this service so that those developers could get back to developing. And so I started in 2015 as the first member of this team. We now have 3.5 team members. I say a half because we've got a guy in Chicago whose title is DevOps engineer, but he's employed by a spoke, and he'll do things for me if they're interesting, but I don't get to tell him what to do. So he's half a team member. Our highest maturity is our CI pipeline. As I said, we've been doing that for quite a while. I mean, they started when Octopus was before version 1. So when they rolled it. So it's been going a lot. And I was surprised at our number of production deploys. We have about 50 total developers, and we had nearly 2,000 production deployments in fiscal year 17, which just ended at the end of September. And I showed that number to some people in the organization, and they said, is this good? And it's a well-taken point, because we have some projects that there's one build in beta and that goes to prod. We have other projects where their build numbers over 4,000 in 1 year. But the point I make on this is every one of those production deploys, which now we're actually using Octopus for things like server restarts and things just so they are controlled and audited. Every one of those is something that was tested in a non-production environment and is at least to some degree automated. And it is eliminating human error. It is making sure we make it impossible to go directly to production. You cannot build directly to production. You cannot deploy directly to production. Everything goes through at least one stage of test. And that is enforced, and I won't set it up any other way, even if they yell about it. And that's where we are in that. And we have a billion different teams. It seems every day I get a new question about something new. We just 2 weeks ago, we spun up a Windows Server build, preview build with the Linux subsystem, and we've got it in TeamCity, and that's now building both Windows and Linux Docker in one box. So we're moving in that direction. We are moving into Azure. For us, Azure makes sense because we're almost entirely .NET. And so we added on the enterprise agreement, and it makes a lot of sense. I know at least one business unit has some AWS out there, but I have no visibility onto it. And for us, we've made the case that while Azure is technically an increase in our security footprint and our vulnerabilities footprint, it is so minuscule compared to our own internal problems, where we did a red team test and they broke them in less than 6 hours. That kind of stuff. Those things have happened. We did another one and they caught them. But we are able to make the point that Microsoft can employ who knows how many thousand people to do security inside Azure. And I had the opportunity to sit down at a Microsoft training center with the guy who wrote Active Directory initially, and now he's a cloud engineer for Azure. And I asked him straight up, what is worse for you as a company, as Microsoft, on Azure? A complete global Azure outage for 24 hours or an Azure security breach? I didn't even hesitate. He said, Azure security breach, by far worse. And so for us, we're moving into the cloud. We've got a couple things out there. They're fairly small, but we've made the case that we can move. And for us and for me, we need to get the templates down because the cloud gives you fantastic options like checkbox encryption and all that kind of stuff. But for us, the learning curve is, the thing that we've learned is you got to make sure they check the damn box and actually use these capabilities. My current emphasis is all on-premise stability and flexibility. I'm literally fighting battles to get my team into VMware so we can keep our templates up to date. Like every server deployment, right? Every server role is manual right now. That's just the environment that I have to live in. And so I come to something like this and I'm like, do I have anything of value to say when that's where we are? But here's my goal for this is the end state of a DevOps initiative to me. When we go talk to other people and talk about how we work day to day, everyone else is jealous. And the way you primarily do that is get rid of the parts of IT that suck. Monster production deploy weekends that take 72 hours. Somebody having to sit and quarterly watch production Windows updates that they just watch progress bars for an entire weekend. Phone calls in the middle of the night. These things suck. And the best thing you can do, I think, to improve the operation of your IT department is identify, because these things are the pain points. They're the things that people hate, and if you can get rid of them, you're probably moving in the right direction. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Phoenix project and the DevOps handbook later, which I assume a lot of people here have read, but I really like the business value stream analogy that they use. And I'm also operating under the assumption that your dev teams have done Agile training. That's been around longer than the DevOps initiative. In a lot of places, we have developers who are already working in this mindset or who are ongoing, and now we have to integrate this DevOps idea. So your developers, they want to move fast, they want to change often, they want to use cool stuff, and they just want to deliver. And that's their goal. That's their Azure mindset. They're working iteratively. They're taking small steps, and they're trying to do this stuff. Whereas a lot of our ops they all just want uptime. That's the only thing they're concerned about. They want uptime, 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 and anything that is a risk to that uptime is a no to those teams. And then security, so what that means then is you can't move fast. That's a change. We don't know what's going to do that. You can't change all the time because every change is a risk. Every time we go to prod after because in the old paradigm, we develop for 3 or 6 months, and then it's a massive production deploy and problem, and everything sucks. And you can't use cool stuff because we don't know how that's going to impact the environment. We don't know what that's going to do. And security wants to sit and stand on the wall, make sure no one gets in. And they have the same things. All this stuff in the old siloed paradigm of IT, these are all competing interests. And to me, the idea of DevOps is that we stop these things from stopping delivery, and we reorganize the way these groups work together in order to move faster. And so I think of it in the same value stream. Instead of these groups trying to move and entering at different places, I think of it in the way of these teams owe each other certain things. Developers owe security their code up front, so they can start doing security testing, OWASP testing, these things up front immediately. So we know long before this stuff is ready to go for production. Because what's another part of IT that sucks? Developing code for 3 months, getting ready to go for prod, engaging the third-party scanner that comes in, and we've got critical vulnerabilities. Now go back and refactor the whole damn thing because you can't go to prod with this problem. Well, let's give the code early and develop a system where we can look at that stuff and find these vulnerabilities early on, and at the very least, you have the option of deciding what you're going to fix early on, or you make that choice during development that, this is technically a critical vulnerability, but here's these other mitigating factors that we have in our environment, so we're not going to take the time to fix this particular problem, but that's a known risk. The other way, security owes development some guardrails. Here's your operating lane. Do whatever you want inside this space. You've got requirements on your coding practices. You've got requirements on the environment that you're operating in. And as long as you're inside this, do whatever you want. But if you get outside, we're not going to let you go forward. And I'll say that each one of these specific examples is just an example of things that these teams owe to each other. And once they are delivering these types of things, then we all work better together. Development owes operations configurations. Development should understand what their environment needs and how it should operate. And we should be able to get to the point where our configurations are defined in the code. And the configuration of the server, of the container, of whatever, lives with the code from the first iteration and moves through the entire development cycle together. And on the other side, operations owes development good environments that are similar, and so that you're not operating fine in development and working great, but then you go to production, it all blows up because your F5 configurations are different. You've got different options in IIS or in Apache, and these environments need to be repeatable, they need to be similar, and they need to be consistent from one stage to the next. Security owes requirements to operations. How long can you go without patches? What's our rules on emergency patches, security patches, critical patches, recommended patches? What's your timeline? How long do you have to get these into these environments? And operations owes those patches back to security and say, yeah, we can demonstrate that we are 95% in compliance and this 5% is in this state because of these other mitigating factors that, we can't, it's the 2003 server that's out there doing this one thing for one group that the entire world will end if we have to change their stupid practice. But this is the way I like to think about this. And one of the biggest things that comes out of this is that you can't have black boxes. You can't have kingdoms. You can't have people who hoard their little section and they say, send me a ticket and I will send you a result. Or I'll get you what you need. You have to tear those things down. It's been my pet peeve in IT since before I knew what DevOps was. Partly because I just had to take over for a network manager who was that way, and I knew nothing about networks, and suddenly no one knows how anything works. He's left the organization, and crap. But the outcome of all this is that everybody moves faster, everybody changes often, everybody gets to use cool stuff, and everybody delivers. And it's all together. It's not one team fighting for these things. You find the cool stuff, because if you have the right operations guys, they're going to love Terraform. They're going to love configuration and code. The network guys are going to be fantastic with automatic provisioning of nodes in your pools, because it stops them from having to do the day-to-day slog of doing the same things over and over again, and get them in a space where they get to concentrate on the hard problems and the things that actually require expertise and human thought. And so no one else can tell you how to do this. We've all got Juggernauts. We're in these systems. They're operating. An INTL FCStone, which is the worst name in the history of names. It's our CEO says that. But what that is, that's a combination. That is International Assets Holding Corporation, Farmers Commodities, Saul Stone. Saul Stone was a founding member of the Chicago Board of Trade, and that's why his name's on there. And he started this company. He used to sell eggs in Chicago. And then he operated that in the late 1920s. And Farmers Commodities, a grain trader in Iowa that before all the mergers traded more than 50% of the grain in the United States, went through their books. And so we're a new company. We feel tiny. I've got 50 developers. We've got 100 projects that we deployed this last year. But we're massive. We're an old boys club. The business generally doesn't care about IT and doesn't have time for it. And then they've got these separate development groups that we have no control over, and they're building their stuff, and they come to us and they're just mad because the infrastructure can't support what they're doing. And we're like, well, we didn't know what you were doing. How can we possibly get in this? So you've got to take time to turn the juggernaut. The culture has to be lived by some people and spread. It has to have time to take root, to make the case, and to grow. You've also got to do DevOps on purpose. There are people in everyone's organization that are trying to do this stuff and been trying to do it for years, but they do it for themselves, and that's how I have 9 different logging systems that I know about, because everybody self-rolled their own. They saw the value, and so now I'm trying my damnedest with basically no budget to build an aggregated application logging system to bring everyone in. And your pain points are different than everyone else's. You've got a particular set of issues. We all hear the glory stories and of the Netflixes, the Etsy's of the world, and how everything is. But as some people have said, they spent a day, I heard stories about people spending a day with Netflix and hearing about some of the ways they operate and going, oh, that's not cool. That's not good at all. Everybody's got their own particular set of pain points. And so the number one idea that I can give you is just go out and read this stuff. Find ideas, evaluate them. The Phoenix Project was my introduction to it when I didn't know what the hell I was doing and had a DevOps job because a friend of mine convinced his boss I could do it. And the DevOps Handbook is a great follow-up to that. It's more technical. It's more of a slog to get through it because it's not novelized. DevOps Topologies is a site that I like because it talks about patterns and anti-patterns, and that annoys me, but it's a good way to go to look about how you can fit a DevOps initiative into your organization and common pitfalls to certain ways of doing it, and just give you an opportunity to think about how those will work. I'm not going to tell you that any of their supposed anti-patterns don't work, and some of their most recommended ones could be implemented in your organization, could fail spectacularly because of the unique nature of the way you do business. But it's a good place to go and get ideas and get you thinking about how you can organize this. The Phoenix Project, I cannot recommend enough, not necessarily for the people in this room, but for your executives. This is one where you can go, and I think this does a great job of illustrating to an executive who has no real understanding of IT, both of the competing interests inside IT and how these different groups butt heads and cause problems, but additionally why IT in today's world, why without a basic competency in IT, you're going to be behind. I'm in a company where innovation and market disruption is one of our strategic aspects of operation at the highest level of the organization. And my question to them is, we're trying to change the way we do IT. My question to them is, what market are you going to disrupt right now without a technology solution? What are you going to do on pen and paper that's going to change the way anybody does business anywhere? It's not going to happen. You have to provide a new platform. You have to provide a new way to link different financial services, and it's all software-based. You're not going to do this by, two 55-year-old traders going into another room and coming up with some new magic solution that is going to operate on the floor of the exchange. It's got to be software-based. That's where it's all going to come from. Finding the people. This is one where I've hired my team I've hired externally, and I've gotten really lucky, mainly because I didn't have the mandate to go pull people out of where they are. But if you're going to do DevOps, you've got to make it somebody's job. You've got to give somebody the mandate that we're going to start changing. We're going to get this. And this mandate might need to ultimately come from someone like a COO or CEO. It can come from within IT, but the biggest problem here is the resistance that you're going to face, and you've got to give someone the mandate to get around that resistance. That can be with carrots and sticks. The carrot way obviously works better, but sometimes it's got to be a stick. For me, it's literally, if I go back Monday and my team does not have a login to our dev beta VMware instance, I'm emailing the interim CEO and I'm saying, this is ridiculous. We think we can have an honest to God solution in 3 days if we get the keys to this, but they won't give us the keys. That's the kind of stuff sometimes you have to do. There's probably people in your organization that are probably already trying to do this, and you can either have those people as resources on those teams that sit there and you bring in occasionally to make them aware of what everybody else is doing and they're an evangelist on that team, or you can pull them out of the teams into a centralized group that goes out and identifies big chunks and big solutions they can provide and just put that out there and then go and develop it and get it working and put the tool in place and then go get the people to start, more people beyond their own groups to start using it. I said they've got to be empowered to find the problems and go out and fix them. And the third step is do it. This is the Agile mindset brought into operations and development. It's iterative. I had an employee on my team that the biggest problem I had is that he aimed 5 miles down the road. And his vision was fantastic, but I said, we've got to be iterative. We've got to provide immediate improvement. We've got to say, all right, what's the bite-sized chunk we can get out of this to get us one step? We'll work towards that vision. We want to have our eyes down the road, but we just have to move faster in each individual one. And like I said before, your biggest obstacle is resistance to change. The market that I come out of, it's Des Moines, Iowa. It is a insurance hub, and everyone I bring in, and we bring into the organization who's got more than 5 years experience, has spent time in these monolithic, massively risk-averse organizations that in some cases are running on 40, 50-year-old COBOL mainframe processes that they won't touch. They just won't. And we've got 65-year-old people in Des Moines who've been retired for 5 years but still contract, and if they bother to work 40 hours a week, they'd be making $250,000 a year because they're the only people that can keep these things running. And so I bring people in from that environment, and that's where everybody we get comes in, and we've got to convince them, no, there's a better way to do this. If you change more often, each individual change is less risky. And mandate, and then give them a mandate. You've got to identify things that you want to accomplish. You've got to put dates, timelines, everything around it, and you've got to move. If there's blockers, you've got to address those, get around them diplomatically if you can, or escalate up to someone who goes to a team and says, I'm sorry, you've got to give them a window into this. You've got to let other people know how you work. You've got to let them help you improve your processes. Even if you don't want to, you can't be a black box anymore. Celebrate. Identify what your wins are. demonstrate the improvements you've made. A lot of this is around the metric stuff that we talk about. And then tell everybody the cool things that you're working on, the stuff that you do. This is internal as well. If you've got one team that gets on a great pipeline and can do zero downtime deployments and roll servers, and their underlying infrastructure is more in compliance than anybody else, get them talking to other teams about it, how cool it is, how they don't get calls in the middle of the night, how they don't have to do deployments on Saturday mornings, how they keep their weekends and they sleep better and it all works better. And do that evangelization inside your organization, and then everybody in the organization goes outside and makes everybody else jealous. That's basically the end of what I have prepared. And I hope it was useful. You know, I come to these kind of things and I think about the fact that even though we're doing CI/CD, we're fighting these DevOps battles, we're doing all this, I look at other organizations, I'm like, we are so far behind. How can we possibly have anything useful to say? So I hope it was valuable. But the biggest thing is go find that information and think about it in the context of your own organization. You know your pain points. You know things. There are going to be things that people say that you're going to say, nope, that'll never work immediately, because you know how your organization works. And that's the biggest message I can give is go out, read, find the ideas, evaluate them. You're probably going to come up with a solution that is completely unique to everybody else, because we all work with different people in different industries and different organizational structures themselves. So with that, I'll say if there are any questions or comments people have.